Hello, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the weekend special of the Federalist Files. On today's show, foreign leaders call out the new administration. Rand Paul eviscerates Dr. Fauci. I debunk the false narrative of Trump supporters attacking Asian Americans. And finally, a Canadian man jailed for misgendering his own daughter.
Be matched with fairness and equity. Now, when President Harris and I took a virtual tour of a vaccination center in Arizona not long ago.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into the latest edition, the weekend special of the Federalist Files. I have a jam-packed show, a lot of information to throw at you all today. It was weird. As soon as I came out with the last current event, Tuesday night going into Wednesday morning, it seems that the news cycle began to hit on that day. So I have a lot of information now, and I did not have as much information for that show then. I'm going to be talking a little bit. We got some Dr. Fauci stuff, some good stuff with him and Rand Paul on the Senate floor. But I'd like to first start off, go right to the foreign policy strategy. So what we have is we have Biden doing the Freudian slip, saying that Kamala Harris is the president. I think this is maybe the fourth time that he's done this. That has actually been recorded to date. I believe it's the fourth time. He's done this many times before. It's a classic Freudian slip at this point. Now, he just as well yesterday slipped pretty hard walking up to Air Force One. It is obvious that Biden is cognitively declining at a very rapid pace. There's a lot of insiders saying this info. We're not exactly sure who is running the government at this moment. Whether it's Susan Rice, I hear some officials saying it's Susan Rice, and then I also hear people saying Kamala Harris is behind a lot of it. Barack Obama as well. That's another source from what I've been reading. We're not exactly sure at this point who's really actually running the show. But it's obvious that our foreign enemies know that Biden has been compromised. First off, I have a clip from both Vladimir Putin, as well as some Chinese officials. As I reported last show, the United States, I think he's the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, he met with some Chinese officials in Anchorage, Alaska on, I think it was Thursday. So first I'll start off with the Putin clip, play 3.
A war of words erupted just hours after President Biden vowed that Vladimir Putin would pay a price for attempting to undermine the 2020 U.S. election and agreed that the Russian president is a killer.
Regarding my American colleague's statement, as he said, we know each other personally. What I would answer him, I would tell him stay healthy. I wish him good health. I say this without irony.
A chilling warning from the Russian leader whose spies used a banned nerve agent to poison Putin's main opponent. Putin then challenged Biden to talk tomorrow or Monday.
I want to invite Biden to continue this discussion, but on the condition we do it live, online, without any delay, in an open, direct discussion. I think it would be interesting.
In an interview that aired Wednesday, Biden did not mince his words.
So you know Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
So just to add a little context, Biden called Vladimir Putin a killer because apparently the person he was running against in the last election, Putin, the story goes that he poisoned his last adversary that was running against him. But more importantly from this story is we have the Russian president calling out the United States president to have a discussion, or a rather, if you want to call it a debate. He is calling him out to have a conversation with him in the public. He wants the public eye to see how compromised Joe Biden is and how weak their leader looks. So it seems like in America, we have a party, the Democrat Party, that is able to somehow suppress the people so well that the president of Russia, as well as you'll see later with the Chinese national security advisor, but the president of Russia already knows, he knows that our president is compromised. He knows that the president of the United States is not really running the country. He knows that we are dealing with a fully cognitively declining individual as our president of the United States, and he wants to exploit it, and he wants to show people what the leader and what the figurehead of the United States looks like on a national stage. The United States of America, the people themselves that vote in the Democrat Party, they're unaware of this. The media has been covering up. Think about how different, how diametrical of a world that we live in. That we have foreign adversaries calling our government out for what it is. They don't even live here. They can just tell from what they watch on TV themselves, and they're able to tell. They have more self-awareness. They have more awareness of what is actually going on. Their ability to read the media is better than the American people themselves' ability. We have third world countries. We have authoritarian dictatorial leaders in other countries calling the American president out for what he is. And we have a bunch of people. We have 50% of Americans that have no clue what's going on. We have 50% of the population are so uninformed that they have been outstaged by the president of Russia. He knows that the president is compromised. Other countries are aware of this. They're fully aware. From the actions that are going on internationally, you can tell that other countries know that our president's compromised. Other countries know that having a Democrat as the president of the United States, with the policies that they attempt to bestow upon us, they are aware, they are more aware than the American people that it is against America and anti-American sentiment in the policies that have been pushed by Democratic leaders. They are aware of this. When they see Trump leave, they all gleefully clap. They're excited for it. They're pumped up because then they know they're going to have an easy go for at least the next 4 years. That is so unbelievable. You can tell just alone. You can tell if you just read internationally what is going on. You can actually tell who is better for America by just looking at what our opponents think. If you see our opponents are enthusiastic about the new leader, then that means obviously our last leader was really giving them a hard time on what they were handling. So next what I have, which is this one is even worse, folks. We are getting rolled right now by foreign adversaries, our opponents, our political as well as our on the world stage, our opponents are just rolling us right now. They are laughing in our faces. They're making us look like a joke, a mockery. That's what our country has become. Our leaders are a mockery, a disgrace to the United States of America. Our political leaders, they are clowns. They're jokes. They're frauds. Now check out this clip. Now in the beginning, what you're going to hear, this is going to be the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and he is the classical what a Democrat politician would look like. He looks like he went to an Ivy League school. The way in which he speaks, he's reading directly, for those listening and those not watching on Rumble, he is reading directly off the script, and it is so groveling and so pathetic. And he is talking to the National Security Advisor. His name is Yang Jiechi of China. And just hear the response, and I'll give you, after we watch the clip, I'll give you a little bit about the body language of the Chinese National Security Advisor. Play 5.
We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability.
Well, you can't blame this problem on somebody else.
I have to tell you, what I'm hearing is very different from what you described. I'm hearing deep satisfaction that the United States is back, that we're re-engaged with our allies and partners. I'm also hearing deep concern about some of the actions your government is taking.
我们把你们想得太好了，我们认为你们会遵守基本的外交礼节。
Well, I think we thought too well of the United States. We thought that the U.S. side will follow the necessary diplomatic protocols.
所以我们刚才必须阐明我们的立场。
So for China, it was necessary that we make our position clear.
我现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说你们从实力的地位出发同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
From the Chinese, China does not feel that the United States is qualified to speak to China from a position of strength. That is what the National Security Advisor of China has to say to us on the world stage, folks. This is a televised event. And Antony Blinken really thought, smuggy liberal that he is, he's sitting there, he's reading off of a sheet like it's like this thing is like a big, because this is what the American politicians think. This is like a big joke to everybody. This is just a big scheme. It's just a big show for the American people to watch. Oh, look at us really take it to the Chinese leaders. And the Chinese leader is sitting back calmly like a gangster and says to him, well, you guys really, I just want to say in front of everybody, the Chinese and the American side, I just want to say for everyone that's listening, everyone that's involved here, you guys are in no position to tell us how to run our country, and that's the reason we're even having this meeting with you. That's the way we feel about you. That's how threatened we are by you. We don't care. On America, and might I add, this was in Anchorage, Alaska. This is on American soil. And he goes, like a gangster, leans back. Well, you guys aren't really qualified to, you're not in a position of strength to really tell China how to run our country anyway, so go screw. That was the answer, that is the answer that we got from them, from China. Now let me tell you, that is something that never in the 4 years in the Trump administration never happened. That never happened from any world leader. You could say, oh, tweets, but no one went on the national stage on American soil and disrespected the American people that way ever, or the American government ever. That never happened in the last 4 years during the Trump administration. That is unbelievable. That is, we are a farce right now. We look like a giant joke on the world stage. And what I have next is I have the Washington Examiner. Minority View and Intelligence Assessment argues that China meddled in the 2020 election to hurt Trump. Now, this is a story that I'm very surprised has not really gotten much prominence in the news. Jerry Dunleavy is the writer. So you're asking, what is this intelligence assessment? What are you talking about? The National Intelligence, I think it's called the IC Assessment. They came out with a study. They do their little assessment. I don't know if it's every single year, but there's a minority officer, meaning there was a national intelligence officer for cyber that presented this minority view that he believes China was in our elections, attempting to impact the elections. So it starts off this article here. I think he quotes. Okay, so this is the reports. This is exactly what the report notes here. It states, and I quote, "This view differs from the IC assessment, as in the intelligence community assessment, because it gives more weight to indication that Beijing preferred former President Trump's defeat and the election of a more predictable member of the establishment instead, and that Beijing implemented some and later increased its election influence efforts, especially over the summer of 2020. The NIO, which is the National Intelligence whatever, something with national intelligence. The NIO, the National Intelligence Officer, assesses these indications are more persuasive than other information indicating that China decided not to intervene. The National Intelligence Officer further assesses that Beijing calibrated its influence efforts to avoid blowback." So in other words, the rest of the intelligence community knows that China was involved in our election, involved in some sort of, whether it was online, having these troll accounts, whatever it was they were doing, they were attempting to impact our elections in favor of Biden, not in favor of Trump, for obvious reasons, because they know that Biden's weak on foreign policy, and Democrats in general, and in a general sense, the last couple of years, Democrats and Republicans have been extraordinarily weak on foreign policy. and they knew Trump was good on foreign policy. Which is one of the biggest surprises of his administration. The IC community, the rest of them said, yeah, China was in on it, but China, we don't think that they made enough of an impact to actually make a difference. That's where they differ. So this minority officer goes, yeah, but they still attempted and they still made an impact, but they purposely calibrated the influence just to avoid blowback so it wasn't painfully obvious. They also assessed President Vladimir Putin, saying that he was apparently he was supporting Trump and denigrating Biden's candidacy. That's his story on that. Now, Barry Zuloff, an analytical ombudsman and longtime intelligence officer, issued a report to the Senate Intelligence Committee in January. He noted, among many things, that some analysts appeared to hold back information on Chinese efforts because they disagreed with the Trump administration's policies. He states, and I quote, "Given analytic differences in the way Russia and China analysts examined their targets, China analysts appeared hesitant to assess Chinese actions as undue influence or interference. The analysts appeared reluctant to have their analysis on China brought forward because they tend to disagree with the administration's policies, saying, in effect, I don't want our intelligence used to support those policies." End quote. So we have these people in the intelligence community that actually disagreed with Trump and became political, and they decided not to counteract anything that the administration was doing because they disagreed with them politically. So there was no fear to come from China because Trump said, worry about China. So Radcliffe, they have some information here as well from, I think his first name, John Radcliffe. He was the former director of national intelligence. And he stated, this is an unclassified letter that he gave to the current administration as he was leaving his position. He states, from my unique vantage point as the individual who consumes all the U.S. government's most sensitive intelligence on the People's Republic of China, I do not believe the majority view expressed by the intelligence community analysts fully and accurately reflects the scope of the Chinese government's efforts to influence the 2020 U.S. federal elections. Includes concerning revelations about the politicization of China election influence reporting and of undue pressure being brought to bear on analysts who offered an alternate view based on the intelligence. So we have the intelligence community is just not acting on this news, and the minority officer who's in cyber thinks that they had a huge impact, China, but they scaled it perfectly so to not receive blowback and not make it obvious to the rest of the people, not make it transparent. And then he goes on, I think Rick Grinnell, former acting director of national intelligence, he states, the media misses the nuances on purpose. The report makes clear that once again the Russians pushed misinformation in the 2020 election. Meanwhile, the report plays down China's leverage campaign by using a different standard. They didn't change the outcome of the election. So the standard is, okay, so China did it. China attempted to impact our election, but they didn't change the outcome. So whatever they did is fine. But whatever Russia did is a problem, even though they're both doing the exact same thing. So that's just another unbelievable. The media, the IC community, doesn't it feel like as a conservative, it must feel sometimes that you are against the entire world. Like and that is the point. The point is to attempt to make you feel lonely, like you are the only one that feels the way you do, which is why they don't allow conservatives to do a lot of things, why they attempt to cancel a lot of us. They don't want us on TV. They don't even want us. Years ago, I used to remember where you can actually go on CNN, and every once in a while they would actually bring a real conservative on there, and yeah, they'd have them face like 6 different liberals at a time. The liberals would all be yelling at them where they would be unable to answer, but at least they would attempt to bring them on for debate. They don't want debate anymore. They do not want policy debate. They do not want the people to realize that the Democrat Party platform is full on, not only is it socialist, but is authoritarian in nature. And is also a terrible way to govern. Their policies they can't run on because their policies are terrible. As Rush Limbaugh has said many times, they do not think that they have to win elections. They feel entitled, like an election to them is a joke. Why should we have to win an election? We're the Democrat Party. Look at us. We're the elitist clowns. Look at us. We're the ones with the Ivy League educations. We're the geniuses. Why is it that we have to win the vote of the American people? These people are beneath us. They are idiots. We feel that we are above them. Why should we even have to fight to get their vote? So they never even believe. They don't even want an idea. They don't like the idea of an election. They don't like the idea of a debate. The debates that happen now on politics aren't even really debates. Years ago, I watch clips. I watch clips of Thomas Sowell. I watch clips of Milton Friedman. I watch even Rush Limbaugh when people went on to debate him. They were actually debates. They talked about policy. Now they no longer do that. It is about BS. It's about things that people, honest to God, should not be caring about. If people care about some of these debates they had in the last thing, some of this COVID-19 stuff, it's a joke. If that's what you're worried about as the American citizen, if the government's protecting you all the time from things like that, from viruses, things you really just are out of your control to an extent, the only thing that you really could have debated over is how quickly you could have got a vaccination done. That is the only thing to be debated over in that case. But it's difficult being a conservative, especially when you are recently what they would call red-pilled. And that's what I realized. I fight. I continue to fight. I always will fight. They will have to imprison us to stop us from fighting. And I think they may start to begin to maybe understand that. Right now what they're going to do is they're going to subliminally message to the people. That is why they call us white supremacists. Notice how they no longer call us racists. Because the word racist has kind of lost its meaning because of overuse. So now they bring a new term in, and it's called white supremacy. And that's what they continue to call us. And it is because if you can convince the people that everyone that votes opposing to you is a white supremacist, then it justifies the next action of imprisoning them for their thoughts. It justifies shutting down speech. It justifies making speech completely illegal. They have already shut down speech. They already have gotten to that step by taking us off of Twitter and kicking Parler off of all the network platforms. They've already taken that step. And it's difficult when you are a conservative, and like I'm going to go back to this idea of red pilling. I don't even really like saying red pilling because then that means that you chose as in red. People think it means kind of you chose the Republican Party. Red pilling comes from a term from the Matrix. When you suddenly realize you have been politically awoken, you understand now, and you have a full view of what is actually transpiring right under your nose, and the media is not reporting any of it for you. So then you have to go out of your own way to find this information. And then it's difficult. It is to the point where you can't forget about it and you can't quit. When you become a conservative, when you become politically awoken, when you realize what actually is going on, there's no giving up. You can't just go back into your hole. You can't forget about it because you realize how existential it is, how existential the outcome is if these tyrants, authoritarians are able to continue to rear their ugly head and shout you down and imprison you. And it's just, I say to you all, and I have a friend that he stopped listening. He stopped listening for a couple, and he said, I just don't know what to do because, you tell me all of these things, and I just get depressed, and I get whatever. Just continue to fight, continue to have these discussions. The time for mass noncompliance, I don't think is here yet, but I think it is coming soon. And just act the way, say what you want to say. That's it. Don't think, I can't say this because, I might get some backlash. Say whatever you want. Because the more and more you do that, the more confident others will be to say the exact same thing as you. And just to go off this new white supremacy story. So the FBI says, and this is a big story that happened earlier this week. We have this deranged human being in Atlanta, went around to different spas, killed, I think it was 8 women or 8 employees of different massage parlors or spas in 3 different massage parlors. And the left comes out, they propagate the idea, this is a white supremacist for sure. This is all linked to white supremacy because they've been propagating this story that Trump because he used the term Wuhan virus a couple of times. They're now blaming Trump for this gentleman going out and shooting, or this sleazeball going out and shooting and killing all of these people. So to play what the administration thinks about this and who the administration points the finger at, you have Jen Psaki, play 7.
Why does the president think attacks on Asian Americans are increasing in this country? Why does he think that's happening?
Well, I think there's no question that some of the damaging rhetoric that we saw during the prior administration, blaming, calling COVID, the Wuhan virus or other things, led to, perceptions of the Asian American community that are inaccurate, unfair, have raised, threatening, has elevated threats against Asian Americans. And
so from the National Pulse piece, according to the Wall Street Journal, the individual, I'm not going to say their name, I do not want to give them any clout, the suspect in the killing of 8 people at 3 massage parlors in the Atlantic area told investigators that he targeted the businesses because he blamed them, and I quote, for providing an outlet for his addiction to sex, which he told law enforcement officials. He is in custody. He took responsibility for the shootings and said he acted alone. And he stated, the Captain Jay Baker of Cherokee County Sheriff's Office stated, and I quote, "It's a temptation for him that he wanted to eliminate. He said it was not racially motivated." So we have the individual, and I guess the best person to ask for what their impetus for killing was the individual that was involved and the individual that carried out the killings, saying, he has a sex problem. This guy has a sex addiction. Obviously, he has some mental health issues. Obviously, he's a deranged human being. He himself disproves the myth of the media is attempting to promulgate. And next what I have, speaking of the media, the left-wing media, and Jen Psaki herself, who was a contributor to CNN during this time, I have the legacy media. And just listen to what they call the coronavirus. Play 6.
Concern is growing this morning over an outbreak of a new SARS-like virus in China. At least 6 people have died from the Wuhan coronavirus. The Wuhan coronavirus. The 34-year-old ophthalmologist diagnosed Saturday with the Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus. What more can you tell us about the similarities or differences between SARS and the Wuhan coronavirus?
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus in China.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
From the Wuhan coronavirus.
Wuhan coronavirus.
Fears continue to grow over the outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus.
Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
We have new information about how the Wuhan coronavirus is.
So that is mostly CNN. That is thank you to the MRC, the Media Research Center, for providing that clip. That is about I think it's a 2.5 minute long clip. I cut it down just for sake of time. And next, additionally, what I also have up on the screen here, this is CNN's own tweets, January 20th, 2020. A new Chinese coronavirus, a cousin of the SARS vaccine, has infected more than 200 people since the outbreak began in Wuhan, China in December. Scientist Leo Poon, who first decoded the virus, thinks it likely started in an animal and spread to humans. So they describe it, they characterize it as the Chinese coronavirus. China says, and there's another one, China says the deadly Wuhan coronavirus can spread before symptoms show, calling into question the U.S. strategy to contain it as a new case is confirmed in California, and this was written on January 26, 2020. So I guess then CNN is also responsible for any type of Asian hate crimes in the future that are obviously conducted by Trump supporters because of Trump's rhetoric. And just to debunk that myth and that theory as well, anti-Asian violence study, I have it out of the Washington Examiner, written by Ryan Grudusky. And it starts off, while there are some violent perpetrators who are white, conservative, or Trump supporters, FBI statistics suggest that most anti-Asian violence has come from black perpetrators. Refusing to look at these statistics represents a refusal to take seriously the lives and security of Asian Americans. So according to the Justice Department, and I guess this is the FBI Uniform Crime Statistics, or the Uniform Crime Report, the UCR, 27.5% of all violent crimes against Asian Americans in 2018 were committed by black people. That's over 50,000 incidents in a single year. White criminals and Asian criminals each accounted for 24.1% of all attacks on Asians. Asian people, similar to their white counterparts, are underrepresented in violent crimes committed to the proportion of the population they make up. In 2019, Asians made up 6.2% of the population, but just 1% of the perpetrators of violent crime. White people are 62% of the population, but commit 50% of violent crime. So they're disproportionately represented. So more importantly here, you have generally, when it comes to any group, specifically, for example, white people, black people, Hispanic people, and then Asian people as well, the most crime that usually is committed, perpetrated, the perpetrator usually is of that community. Why is that, you ask? That is because people actually naturally segregate themselves. And this has been found in many communities. It has been found in New York specifically, from which Thomas Sowell writes about in his one book. I think it's called Diversity and Disparities, I believe the book is called. People naturally find a way to segregate themselves. And what do you mean when you say, what do you mean segregate? Not segregate by law, as in moreover, people from, and he found this in his studies in New York, people from northern Italy generally lived in one neighborhood, and then people from southern Italy lived in another neighborhood. So we're not even talking about ethnicity. We're talking about more specifically, I guess, cultural background, where you specifically geographically where your family comes from is where you end up moving in. And I see this still plays on to today in a lot of areas from my own experiences. So people are much more likely to live in communities of people that are comprised of from the same origin, from the same countries, which is why Asian Americans, 24.1% of all crimes against Asian Americans are perpetrated by Asians as well. And this plays the same way with the black community, same way with the white community, same way with the Hispanic community as well. It's the same way, where it's usually high. It's usually higher, but in this case, you have 27.5% of all violent crimes against Asian Americans were perpetrated by black people. Okay, so we're going to continue on this story. So you're saying, okay, so this is interesting data and information if this is all perpetrated by Trump supporters. And let me just remind you, the black population in America, I'm pretty sure Trump got around 20% of the black population. When it comes to black males, I want to say it was around 20%. Black females, it was a little less than that. So, and he goes on, more interestingly. He says, put simply, the left has said the worst element plaguing society is white privilege. It has then made Asian Americans an accomplice to the crime. We might also note that recent high-profile crimes against Asian Americans have been committed in extremely liberal and democratic-controlled cities and counties. There was the beating of a laundromat employee in San Francisco, the deadly assault of a 84-year-old in San Francisco, the fatal attack against a 75-year-old Asian American in Oakland, which is all California, an 89-year-old woman being set on fire in Brooklyn by a pair of teenagers, the stabbing of a 36-year-old worker in Manhattan, and the murder of an 83-year-old in White Plains, New York. None of these locations could be described as MAGA country. A serious nation would look at these trends, data, anecdotal evidence, and socioeconomic developments all point to a multifaceted explanation and solution behind this terrible crime wave. Sadly, that's a less politically correct option than to blame white supremacy. So if you really sit there and you look at the statistics, you will find that the narrative that is being promulgated by the media is just a flat-out lie. This generally happens. Violent crimes are perpetrated by black Americans much more than it is by white Americans. as against Asians, and it's also in these very, very, very blue states, and in these very extreme, you don't even talk about blue states, extraordinarily blue cities are the ones where these crimes are being perpetrated right now. And to go off that, I have a critical race theory. I have a video of Ron DeSantis. He talks about, very briefly, about critical race theory and how it will not be taught in Florida schools. Play 8.
Florida civics curriculum will incorporate foundational concepts with the best materials, and it will expressly exclude unsanctioned narratives like critical race theory and other unsubstantiated theories. Let me be clear, there's no room in our classrooms for things like critical race theory. Teaching kids to hate their country and to hate each other is not worth 1 red cent of taxpayer money.
Now, I talked to many friends that I held when I was younger, and we played sports together, and I say, I don't remember any of this happening. I don't remember any of this critical race theory, any of this idea that if you're white, you're part of the white patriarchy, you're part of the white supremacy, or you benefit from being white, and you are complicit in white supremacy because you benefit from the system. The system themselves, if you're doing very successfully in this country, it's the equality of outcome, not the equality of opportunity, which is the root base of Marxism as well as this new critical race theory. If you are successful, there's nothing attributed to you that you did not work hard to get there. It is all attributed to this ideology of white supremacy and this white supremacy institution. And then when you ask the question, okay, so what in this current day and age can you point me to a law or a policy that has been implemented that has helped me gain this advantage or this success over you? And there is no policy. It can't be found. The only policy you can find is affirmative action, which does not benefit whites or Asian Americans in that case. And this is the idea. This is cultural Marxism. That's why I think it's important to point it out for what it is, what DeSantis calls it out for. It forces you pretty much, it makes a bunch of people that were okay with each other hate each other. It is the idea that I am somehow, in my success, I am taking away opportunities from somebody else. My existence is complicit with white supremacy. My success is complicit with the patriarchy, the white patriarchy, or the white supremacist system or the institution. And it is just the idea that any disparity of outcome is automatically attributed to something else. It is not attributed, it is attributed simply as if everybody does not have their own free will and everyone is the same. Everybody has the same work ethic. Everybody works the same amount. Everyone works just as hard. Everyone is just as intelligent as the other person right next to them. That is the ideology. That is the idea. That is what Marxism is. That is what communism is. This is the idea that everybody is the same and they should be... and because of that, everyone should have the equal outcome. If you're a doctor, you get paid just as much as the janitor does. That is the ideology. That is the idea. The idea is me being successful somehow taking away from somebody else, because that success could not have been rightfully earned. Now, Washington Post had to actually go on to congratulate Ron DeSantis on his COVID response, and they're not happy about it, but they have to point to it. I think New York Times as well had a piece on it. They have to point to it because it's transparent, it's obvious. There's nothing that can be done. The numbers are irrefutable that he did a very good job, and he handled the situation. I think at the very beginning, DeSantis actually shut down a little bit, and then once they realized who was really the at-risk population, he continued to open up the state, and kids went back to school. And now they have a surplus in the budget. They did very well. Apparently, you can't even find a house in Florida for a reasonable price right now. The housing market is insane. Houses over the last 6 months have almost doubled in their value in Florida right now because people are moving from a lot of these liberal states en masse to go to Florida. So this Washington Post piece, it's written by Bobby Cana Calvin. So it starts off, it states, and I quote, "One by one, the experts provided vindication for DeSantis, whose insistence on lifting lockdowns, reopening schools, and undermining mask mandates came under scrutiny as the public health crisis unfolded. The Republicans' handling of the virus will no doubt be a key issue when he faces re-election next year. The experts he convened hailed from some of the world's most prestigious institutions, but their views have been rebuked by many mainstream scientists, including U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci, who last year called the anti-lockdown pro-herd immunity push nonsense, quote unquote." So they don't even really, they try to do the best they can in covering it. Obviously, they're extremely subjective, and they're calling DeSantis screwed up. They won't talk about any of the numbers. They won't compare them to California because it just shows one is how to do it and the other one is how not to do it. And what happened was DeSantis got all these experts together. The experts agreed that DeSantis handled the situation very well. And this is the rebuke from the Washington Post saying, "Oh, well, they say many mainstream scientists." And it's like, okay, so just Dr. Fauci. And then they say Dr. Fauci. And Dr. Fauci has become the end-all, be-all somehow from the liberals. The fact that they defend him as often as they do shows that he is a smug liberal. And to go off that, I have Fauci getting wrecked by Rand Paul. Rand Paul had him on the Senate floor. And then I'm going to play 2 clips for you just for the sake of time. It was about a 7-minute long conversation, so I cut it down a little bit. The first clip, he's going to open up asking how Fauci makes his policy from what studies exactly is he deriving his policy from. Play 2.
What specific studies do you cite to argue that the public should be wearing masks well into 2022?
I'm not sure I understand the connection of what you're saying about masks and reinfection. We're talking about people who have never been infected before.
You're telling everybody to wear a mask, whether they've had an infection or a vaccine. What I'm saying is they have immunity, and everybody agrees they have immunity. What studies do you have that people that have had the vaccine or have had the infection are spreading the infection? If we're not spreading the infection, isn't it just theater?
No, it's not.
You had the vaccine and you're wearing 2 masks. Isn't that theater?
No, that's not. Here we go again with the theater.
So what I've noticed, what Fauci has done, and it's funny, he says theater. Him wearing these 2 masks is theater. It's a virtue signal. It is on the left, and you commonly see this. They have these stupid bumper stickers. They have these catchphrases. They like to post things on the internet to make themselves seem like they're virtuous. And virtue seems to be one of the biggest and most valuable things in today's society. It's very easy to see or to go out and say something, and it's different. It's much more difficult to put it into action. And the liberals, what they do is they just virtue. They say, oh yeah, higher taxes. Okay, then why don't you every single year pay a gift to the government? If you think taxes are so great, why is it that you have to confiscate or you need a government implementation of higher taxes? Why don't you just go out of your way every single year and write off a gift to the government? Why don't you give the government more of your tax dollars than you thought before? And they usually don't have an answer. When you ask them, oh, did you? They usually have no answer. When they say things about electric cars and how they're better for the environment, then you usually, or how they worry about the environment, then you ask them, well, why don't you have a Prius? Why don't you have an electric car? And then they, once again, will have no answer for you. Because they don't do that. They do not sow what they preach. They do not follow through with what their rules are rules for thee, as in you, but not for me. Their rules apply to you. With their feelings and their views and their opinions, they're not really based in reality. They are what you should do, and they will continue to live their lives as they please. And it just makes them seem very, it's a very smug, elitist, arrogant way to handle things. So next I have, this is when Paul just truly, and everything from Fauci is what I noticed his method is, his methodology, and it's always been this way. So when you bring up a certain study, he just will refute the study, and he'll say why it's not a legitimate study. But he never offers, in his counter-argument, another study that actually supports his opinion. But his opinion is, oh well, I don't believe in that study because they used in vitro and it was a retroactive study, which to me isn't the golden standard. And in the science community, it's not the golden standard. Which he might be right. It might not be the golden standard, but isn't it better than what Dr. Fauci is presenting? Dr. Fauci's not presenting anything, and Rand Paul actually pushes him on this, and he asks him. So once again, he asks him, I think for like the third time at this point, what study are you pointing to support the implementation of a double mask or mask use once you have already got the vaccine? Play 9.
What study shows significant reinfection, hospitalization, and death after either natural infection or the vaccine? It doesn't exist. There is no evidence that there are significant reinfections after vaccine. In fact, I don't think we have a hospitalization in the United States after the 2-week period after the second vaccination. We don't have a death in the United States.
It's becoming more dominant.
Policy based on conjecture.
No,
it
isn't based on conjecture.
Variants, so you want people to wear a mask for another couple years.
No.
You've been vaccinated and you parade around in 2 masks for show.
No.
You can't get it again. There's virtually 0% chance you're going to get it, and yet you're telling people that have had the vaccine, who have immunity. You're defying everything we know about immunity by telling people to wear a mask who've been vaccinated. No. Instead, you should be saying there is no science to say we're going to have a problem from the large number of people being vaccinated. You want to get rid of vaccine hesitancy? Tell them they can quit wearing their mask after they get the vaccine. You want people to get the vaccine? Give them a reward instead of telling them that the nanny state's going to be there for 3 more years and you got to wear a mask forever. People don't want to hear it. There's no science behind it.
Well, let me just state for the record that masks are not theater. Masks are protective. And we
have immunity there, theater. If you already have immunity, you're wearing a mask to give comfort to others. You're not wearing a mask because of any science.
I totally disagree with you.
Well, I disagree with you, is what Fauci. So Rand Paul, after questioning Fauci many times about this, you have a bunch of individuals, once herd immunity is reached, or once someone is immune, once they have the vaccination. And we have found, he has said, there has not been one hospitalization after getting this vaccination, 2 weeks after getting the vaccination, once you're supposed to be vaccinated at that point and have built up an immunity. We have not had one person even hospitalized in that scenario, which is the truth. How do you support the idea of still wearing masks after you've been vaccinated? How much longer are we going to do this? And Fauci has absolutely no answers. He's really shown how much of a phony little authoritarian fraud Dr. Fauci is in that interaction. Next, what I have, speaking of the government influencing everyone's lives. And this is a judge, and this is important because it brings up my next story. Judge arrested for child pornography, also headed a drag queen story hour. This is a Daily Caller piece. It's written by Mary Margaret Allahan. It was a Milwaukee judge who he was arrested for child pornography charges, formerly serving as the president of the organization that has offered a drag queen story hour club. This person was like deeply involved with all this weird kid stuff and drag queen story hour, all this LGBT stuff, right? Our society has been sexualizing children now for a couple of years. They have mainstreamed this delusion, this drag queen story hour, which to me is sexualizing children. It's confusing children exactly what they're supposed to be. They're being told as a man that you could dress like a big woman and wear all this makeup and be absolutely just ridiculous. And parents shouldn't be bringing their kids to this. The fact that they're abusing their children too by even bringing them to these events. It's just disgusting and despicable. I've watched videos where like the kids are like sitting on their lap. It's just weird. The whole thing's weird. So this guy, he's a judge. He's a gay dude, and he just got arrested for this. So to continue with this weird LGBTQ I don't even want to call it acceptance or tolerance. It's not even that. It's now where they are being preferred over other people. So I guess it's called preferences. They're being preferred over the rights of the other people. There's a father now in British Columbia who was thrown in jail after referring to his biological female daughter female child as his daughter. She's a 14-year-old girl. This is written by Aaron Peirce. It is a post-millennial piece. It is very important. The name of the individual, the gentleman, his name is Robert Hoogland, and he seems to be the only person that has a clue and is of right of mind and somewhat reasonable in this case. So a warrant that was issued by a judge for the arrest of a father after calling his biological female child his daughter and referring to her with the pronouns she and her. Hoogland was found to be in contempt of court. Hoogland is a father to a gender nonconforming biological female 14-year-old who identifies as transgender and prefers the use of male pronouns. Hoogland has repeatedly called this person his daughter through the court. Has forbade it, although the court has forbade it. So he went to some sort of court or some sort of hearing in Canada. I don't know much about their laws. I know they have this C-16 law, or I think it's C-19 or C-16. I think it's C-16. You cannot misgender somebody. You get thrown in jail for that now, and you can get fined, I think, up to something like 100,000 of whatever their weird, I think it's called the Canadian dollar. He surrendered himself to the court in response to an attorney general warrant for his arrest. It's just, this whole story is just unbelievable. And this is something that I think is coming to a country near you. I really do. Hoogland opposes his daughter undergoing gender affirmation medical procedures and has stated this opposition again and again in the hope of saving his child from irreversible harm. The Canadian medical system, the legal system, and the child's mother press ahead with social and medical transition of the child. On December 14th, 2020, Hoogland was compelled by Justice Mazzari's court to collude in the gender transitioning of his 14-year-old daughter and told not to call his biological female child his daughter. In response, Hoogland made a charter challenge engaging his right to freedom of speech. When he appeared in family court, the judge forced him to sit the prisoner's dock, said Hoogland's lawyer, even though he was guilty of no crime. The judge referred to him as the accused. Lind made an application for the judge to recuse himself on the basis that all of this was prejudicial. This was denied, of course. And this is the father talking about his child. And this is just disgusting. It's despicable what they're doing to this guy and what they're doing to this kid. So in the United States, I don't know how it works in Canada, but age of consent, I think, is 16 in the United States. I'm pretty sure. So we are going to overstep your age of consent. At 16, at 14, you can change your genitalia to whatever you want. You can undergo this hormone therapy, which you can never go back to. And I think this is a very important thing to point out. I think they have the actual number. So Hoogland, he tells his story. The child had complex problems, but the court blamed them all on gender dysphoria. His marriage to the child's mother had broken up. He said that in grades 5 and 6, his daughter was getting into trouble and hanging out with boys, so they arranged for her to see the school counselor. In grade 7, because they do it weird in Canada, he noticed she cut off her long hair and started wearing a toupee. He said that she developed intense crushes on 2 male teachers and made a suicide attempt. So this child was deeply having some serious issues, emotional problems, right? So Hoogland, what he discovered, this father, he discovered that the school had been showing the daughter SOGI or SOGI 123, which is the going sexual and gender identity education materials in British Columbia, which amounts to transgender ideology propaganda videos. In the age 7 yearbook, the child was referred to by a different name. The school counselor changed the child's name without telling her parents. The school socially transitioned the biologically female child on its own initiative with the input of a gender ideologue psychologist, Dr. Wallace Wong. So we're having the state take over the parents' role, and this is a serious bleeding into the public and the private life here, and this is going on in Canada. I personally think this is currently, some of these things are going on in the United States. People have yet to be jailed for it, but this is going on where schools are changing all of this around and accommodating the child without telling the parent. When Hoagland accompanied his child to a consultation with Wong, the psychologist advised the pubescent child to take testosterone. Wong referred the child to the endocrinology unit at the local hospital. Meanwhile, Hoagland was looking for mental health solutions to help the child without drugs. On the child's first visit to the hospital, a treatment plan was put into action. Both the child and her mother, Hoagland's ex-wife, signed a consent form which explicitly stated that the treatment was experimental, meaning that the endocrinologists recommending the treatment didn't know the long-term health impact. So they don't even know. This is irreversible damage that's going to be done here. And what's very important about this case, Hoagland, in contrast, thinks his daughter's best interests lie in preserving his child's health. In case his child ends up among the estimated 85% of children who desist in their belief that they are the opposite sex once puberty ends. He said, "Here I am sitting there as a parent watching a perfectly healthy child be destroyed, and there's nothing I can do but sit on the sideline," according to Justice Bowden, who was the judge in the case at the time. "I can only affirm or get thrown in jail." So he can only affirm it because the state says so, or he gets thrown in jail. And 85% of the time, once puberty ends, these people, this urge to switch from one gender to the other is completely gone. 85% of the time. Why is it that there can't be a waiting period? And that's what my question is. Why is it that we need to do irreversible harm now? And this is, I think, coming, I really do. I think this is coming to America, and this is a huge problem. It's the sexualization of children. It is causing children to make decisions that they will later regret. And it will cause them, I think it causes higher suicide rates in effect because of this, because of their regret. And then it goes on to end here. Bowden's court held, as in the judge's court held, that the father's consent was irrelevant. The judge went a step further, declaring that the girl's parents must affirm their child's gender identity and refer to the child as though the fact of her being a gender non-conforming biological female who identifies as transgender means that the child is a boy. If he did not, the parent would be implicated of the criminal offense of family violence. So it's unbelievable. So now words are becoming violence. This has been talked on many college campuses where now words are violence. If you misgender somebody, or if you dead name them, if you use their old name, or you don't use the proper pronouns, that you're committing violence upon them, which is an absurd, because violence has a legitimate, objective, legal definition. So next, what I have, the Bank of America study shows investors fear inflation more than they do COVID. This is Jeff Cox writes it. This is a CNBC article. There's a little bit, we're going to get into the intricacies of the economy. Inflation has come into view this year as government bond yields have spiked to pre-pandemic levels. One market-based indicator, the break-even rate between 5-year treasury yields and inflation index bonds, has jumped to its highest level in nearly 13 years. Survey respondents said a move to the 2% level in the 10-year treasury note could cause a jump, a stock market correction, or more than a 10% drop. A jump to 2.5% would make bonds more attractive than equities. The benchmark note was trading around 1.6% Tuesday morning. So what this seems like to me is that they're raising the percentages on bonds, which I think that's what it's trying to say. The inflation indexed bonds has jumped, so the break-even rate is much higher. So, which means investors may be pulling their money out of the market and throw it in these bonds to insure their money, because there isn't much stability right now in the market. Investors fear the inflation more than they do COVID, which makes sense. Now I have a Market Watch report. U.S. import prices jump 1.3% in February, and I think this is actually very important as well. So we're already seeing the inflation numbers go up in imports and exports. And that just means the American dollar is being valued at less. That's the reason for the inflation, especially when it comes to exporting your items and importing, because you're doing all foreign. This is all foreign money transactions. Now, this is written by Jeffrey Bartash, and it is a Market Watch article. It starts off, the cost of imported goods jumped 1.3% in February and rose sharply for the third month in a row, reflecting a rebound in inflation that's been driven in large part by higher gasoline prices. And this is a very interesting part of this. The import price index jumped 1.3% in February, the government said Thursday. Import prices also increased 1.4% in January and 1% in December. After falling early in the pandemic, import prices have surged well above pre-crisis levels. The yearly rate of import inflation climbed to 3% in February. If fuel is excluded, import prices moved up 0.4% last month. Over the past year, import prices minus fuel have risen 2.8%. Rising demand as the global economy recovers and disruptions in supply lines caused by the pandemic have led to shortages of some key materials such as computer chips and lumber. That's leading to delays in production and pushing up prices as companies compete for resources. U.S. export prices increased 1.6% in February. They have also been rising rapidly for the same reason. So now oil is becoming used much more. The supply and demand chain is causing the pricing and the inflation to rise. It would have really helped us if we ended up having, and there's 21 states actually that are suing the Biden administration for the Keystone Pipeline, saying he actually doesn't have the power to do what he did because this was all passed through I think it was through legislation in 2012 or 2011. And the real meaning behind this is, okay, so we passed this through legislation, the people have spoken, the people have passed this, you don't have the power right now, once a law has already been proposed, to just eliminate it, or a bill has already been proposed to just completely eliminate it. Which is true, so they're suing him for that. But part of this reason, part of this inflation, the reason for this is the Keystone Pipeline shutdown. Part of it. Then the other part is, without fuel excluded, we have 0.4% in 1 month. Over the past year, we've seen the prices minus fuel have risen 2.8%. So if you prorate that 0.4% for an entire year, that is 4.8%. So we're seeing like astronomical, it'll almost double. We're going to see an almost double of the inflation rate if it continues to move at this pace, which is not good. So partially it has to do with fuel. And then partially it has to do with a lot of our trading and our inflation of currency, because we're just printing absurd amounts of money. And then that news that's coming out that I reported on last show, in the now attempt, they're going to attempt to raise capital gains tax. I don't know. I hope that this does not go through, because I think this will completely put a stranglehold on the middle class. And you ask, oh, well, why is that? You know, Biden's came out, $400,000. That's the only people that are going to be taxed. Anybody that makes above $400,000, anyone below that. Now, that is now, from what I've been reading, this is not true. It is anybody that makes over $200,000 now, folks, which hits a lot more Americans than before. And I've explained this many times. When you raise the taxes on that upper level, a lot of those people could be employers. How is it if they themselves work on a budget and they make so much, they have a certain percentage that they make on every single sale? If they're being taxed at higher rates, they still have to meet their baseline. Whether their prices could go up. A ShopRite now has to give people less hours because they can't afford to pay the taxes. Their prices may have to go up. It's just that everything is relative. As soon as the government gets involved taking more money from businesses, you best know that money is not actually coming out of the business's bank account. The business is not taking their bank account and handing it to the government. What's happening is your bank account, you spending your money in ShopRite. You realize now apples by the pound are $5, where before they were only $2.50 or they were only $3. The tax is either paid, and usually it's always paid by the consumer when we hit taxes. Usually I'd probably say 90% of the time it's paid by the consumer, and then maybe some of the percentage is taken from the employer itself, or the employees that are working are not getting as many hours. And why I'm bringing up taxes right now, I have a Just the News daily poll on taxes. It's by Daniel Payne. And as you can see by the visual here, which of the following policy priorities would you support raising taxes for? So this is the American people. This is a plus or minus rate, meaning that's their failure rate. You could be either plus or minus 2.8% of these numbers, so these numbers are pretty relatively spot on. You have 52% of Americans. They don't support raising taxes at the present time for anything, for any bill. They do not care. Now you have another, 40, not even 40, 40, approximately 40% would be, they would support it if it was for certain things. Debt and deficit reduction, and the debt and deficit reduction might be Republicans, I'm not even sure. Rebuilding America's infrastructure and climate change. But you have 52% of Americans do not support it. And then another poll I have, which this one's very interesting as well. A Rasmussen report. Washington Examiner reports that Andrew Mark Miller is the author. The poll released on Wednesday by Rasmussen Reports found that 75% believe photo identification should be presented before voting, and that 69% of black voters support voter ID laws. So these voter ID laws that the Democrat Party have tricked everyone into believing are so racist, you have 69% of black voters agree with it. 75% of the entire country, on average, believes in photo identification. Broken down by party, 60% of Democrats support showing an ID to vote. 60% of Democrats even support showing an ID to vote, compared to 89% of Republicans. This is an important issue here, folks. This is like the number one in terms of if you want to eliminate as much voter fraud as humanly possible. And you said, hey, you have to enact one policy. This would be the number one policy on the list to enact. The quickest one would be able to mitigate the most voter fraud in one policy. That is the one to go forward with. And so if you say 75% of Americans, okay, so if we actually went with a constitutional, this has more clout. This law being passed has more clout than anything that the administration has done so far. The administration, almost every bill that they've passed has not been bipartisan, it has been by maybe one vote, and it's Kamala Harris's. Every controversial law that's been passed thus far has been straight party politics down the line, with Kamala Harris breaking the tie in the Senate. This policy, actually, if you say 75%, okay, so this may actually warrant a constitutional amendment. If they voted how the people wanted, how their constituency wanted, you could easily have 2/3 of Congress vote this through, and then 75% is 3/4. So 75% would pass through the state legislatures. You can actually make this an amendment. That is the type of support that they have for voter ID laws right now. There's actually support from that, and this is bipartisan support. You have 60% of Democrats agreeing. 60%. You can't get two parties to agree on anything in this country, like anything. This is the one thing that they actually look like they would agree on. But that's not going to happen because the Democrats want to win. They want complete, total, unfettered raw political power, and they know that if there was voter ID, they would no longer be able to win elections. So they'll never let that happen, unfortunately. So I have my last couple of headlines. That will conclude the regular show. I have a lot of headlines here, so I'm going to try to get through them as quickly as I can because I know I am crunched for time. This was a huge episode, a lot of information. I greatly appreciate if you hung in there for all of it. I have just a couple more things. Portland cut the police funding, and they got a 2,000% increase in murders. So that's like what a 20-time increase in murders of what it was before. It's unbelievable. Great Britain expanding nuclear warheads by 40%. And this is what I was alluding to earlier with the Chinese and Russia. they think we're weak, and it seems like our own allies think we're weak because they're loading up themselves with nuclear warheads, saying, "Oh, we're gonna have to defend ourselves. It looks like America's nowhere to be found." Michigan judge rules Secretary of State violated election law in relation to absentee ballots. The Washington Examiner. This one I thought was interesting. So now we finally have a judge coming out and ruling that the Secretary of State changing the rules in relation to absentee ballots, the Secretary of State of Michigan doing this, was directly in violation of the Constitution. So they ruled against them, which is good. It'd be nice if the Supreme Court would do something like that. Actually follow the Constitution. So we also have Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren. They're still attempting to push this Biden to cancel the debt. This is a Business Insider piece. I think what they're going to try to do is rack up actually as much U.S. government debt as they can. So pass as many spending bills, because then it further justifies and legitimizes a raise in the tax base, in the tax structure. Which I think that every single politician or every single person, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, conservative or a liberal, you should support being able to keep more money in your bank account and keep more money in your pocket. If you want higher taxes, then what you should do is you should pay out a gift to the government every single year at the end of the year, if that's really what you want. If you think the government is a net good in society and they do a very good job and they're highly efficient with the money that they bring through with taxation, then you yourself should gift the government your paycheck. That's all I have to say about that. Now, Oregon attempting to implement permanent mask policy. This is a Federalist piece. This one is outrageous. They want a mask policy that would be permanent in the state of Oregon. And then I was reading something insane, like having to do with some sort of school restriction, things that they're still doing in Oregon that to me are just absurd, where I don't even find it, right on its face to do now. And what I have seen from Oregon is the outdoor sports teams, through their state regulations, are mandated to wear facial coverings, where the arbitrary measure of 6 feet distancing cannot be guaranteed. So even when they're playing outdoor sports in Oregon, you have to wear a mask, which is just absurd. It's ridiculous. Another one, Candace Owens is suing Cardi B now for the false statement she said about her husband. She said that Candace's husband, I think, was like cheating on her or something, which is just not true. And then she put up a doctored tweet that was not real. It was made by one of Cardi B's fans. So Candace Owens' response is, okay, well, I'm just going to sue you for defamation of character, which is good on her, because this misinformation that comes from not only the media but the celebrity class, it's not worth anything anymore. And this is what has to happen now to change narratives around, because what happens is the big story is the narrative, and then days later there's a retraction of the story, but it doesn't matter, because the big story that came out originally is what is in everyone's heads, and they don't go to counteract, or they don't go to follow up on the original story to find out that some sort of counter theme came out, that a retraction of the story. So the last one I have, 21 states suing Biden, which I mentioned before. So that'll conclude this episode. I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. As always, please like, share, subscribe. Drop the mic, as in my name, Mike. Drop the mic on people. Let them know about the podcast. Thank you. I will see you all on Monday. Take care.